All right, welcome back to episode 3 of The Beautiful Mind in the Beautiful Game. My name is Chris Wehan. I played professional soccer for 7 years, and now I work with players specifically on the field, but more importantly, online with your mindset on how to reach your highest potential, using your mind to benefit yourself rather than hinder yourself. And I'm joined by my good friend, mentor, coach of mine, Gabe Nosseir. How are you,
Hey,
Gabe?
Chris. Good. How are you doing, man? It's great to be here again.
Yeah,
Uh,
please introduce yourself and then tell us what we're going to be talking about today.
yeah, my name's Gabe Nosseir. I'm a life and performance coach and work with athletes, with parents of athletes, and coaches as well. Very tuned into the holistic view of the person, so physical, mental, emotional, even energetic, since we're all made up of energy. And it's really it can be deep work into knowing the self and improving performance. Doesn't matter if it's on the field as a parent, as a coach. The more you get to know yourself, the better off you're going to be able to serve yourself and serve others. So today we're going to talk about the player's relationship with the self. And we're also going to delve in a little bit into the coaches and parents' relationships with themselves as well. And so you've been on this journey, Chris, of getting to know yourself on a deeper level. And that's when, we started working and, I could see a lot of shifts in you. So let's just jump right in it. How did your journey of self-awareness start? And also, how has it helped you?
Yeah, I think I've always had interest in knowing myself, but I would really say that has grown tremendously over the last year and a half coming out of soccer. I think I look back at my career and I know of moments where I was doing well with that, but there was moments where I wasn't doing well with knowing myself. And I think that there's so many different layers of knowing yourself, as I'm sure that you would agree with.
Oh, yeah.
But as I've come out of professional soccer, I really have realized that I have gotten far away from that, that there was things that I was doing that were hindering myself and keeping me from really understanding myself and ultimately being the highest version of myself and being in line with that, aligned with that. And, ultimately, I think as an athlete, you want to do everything you can to reach your highest potential. And I think knowing yourself and knowing the tools and the things that you can implement to become the highest version of yourself is ultimately what's going to allow you to reach the highest potential. And ultimately, that is the goal of just being the best athlete. And I think the more you can be in line with your highest version of yourself, then when you are in athletics, you are operating at a very high level, at a high potential. The outcome, things that happen to you, things that happen for you are so much out of your control. But I also believe that when you come out of sport, as long as you're in alignment with that, then your transition is easier. And what I've found with myself is that transition has been a little bit more difficult because I was not operating from a place of my highest self. And now I am realizing that and I'm doing a lot of work into understanding myself better. And that's kind of what's led me here to being like why I want to coach and help athletes in so many different facets, whether it be trying to be your highest version of yourself, reach your highest potential, but also those athletes that are coming out of transitioning out of sport and back into life, into the real world. So I'm curious to know what your experience has been like with yourself getting, you've been on a long spiritual journey of getting to know yourself, and I'm kind of curious to know your story and give that history to us.
Yeah. Well, I have different chapters as we all do. And, as a player, I really struggled with confidence, really struggled. I went through a lot as a child, like, kind of some abandonment issues, a little bit of neglect, some trauma, some PTSD. I was actually went through a war. I lived in the Middle East. and also was physically abused by my stepmother. So, it was a lot of like packed into an 18-month window in my life, which really I could see impacted me and made me shrink as a person. And then so my journey from that was to be able to like start stepping into my more power and more confidence and also more focus and discipline because I was kind of scattered all over the place as an adolescent. All this stuff happened when I was a younger child. And so my journey in adolescence really led me to being I didn't really know myself very well, and I'd like dabble here, dabble there. I played soccer, but I didn't really have the discipline and the focus into it. I was trying to play basketball, which didn't work out. I'm 5'7" on a good day, and not I didn't have the hops to make up for it, let's just say. And it wasn't until I got into when after I graduated high school, actually while I was in high school, like towards the end, and I remember my high school team, we didn't make state and we were so close and there was one game where I cost our team a big goal that if we would have won that game we would have gone to state and we I went and watched the state tournament and I saw the team that made it instead of us and I said, you know what, if I was just a little bit more focused and a little bit more disciplined we would have been on that field, and that actually led me to want to be a coach. And my purpose was to make sure no players felt the way I did. And so that really propelled me into the coach that I became. And now what I'm doing with myself is to help others learn about themselves. And so what I've learned in this is you're absolutely right. If you're going to operate at a high level, you need to be in your essence and your higher self. But in order to really get there, you have to get to know your shadow side and your false self and kind of all those habits. So for you, I'm curious, if you're willing to share, like what did you learn about yourself that wasn't helping you, and how did you shift out of that?
Um, yeah, I mean, there's parts of the story that I'm still trying to share, and I'm not, and I don't want, this isn't like some big mystery. I think in terms it was really what I was putting into my body that was sort of suppressing how I was feeling. And I think when the time is right, I will share more in depth of what that was and how I was doing it. But it was really suppressing how I'm feeling. So towards the end of my career, it really started when I was in San Jose with the earthquakes in 2018. I was in a difficult environment and it didn't feel safe for me. Whereas growing up, my parents did a good job of really creating a safe environment and not helicopter parents, not sheltering me and my siblings from the world, but it was a safe environment and I could express myself through soccer, and my parents really supported me in that. And then I went off to UNM, and I think we touched upon this last episode that Paul and Fish really created a safe environment and a place where you felt like you were cared for. And when I was in Reno, similar thing. I had a really good network of friends on the team that we really cared for each other. We really looked out for each other. We hung out all the time and like we would banter with each other like siblings, but like when it came to like being on the field, you knew it was like a brotherhood. Like we were all like in it together. When I got to San Jose, it was a really difficult environment. And San Jose, I didn't also create the safest environment for me off the field. And that's sort of where I started probably leaning into drinking alcohol more than I should have. And
Mhm.
it wasn't by any means that I was an alcoholic or was drinking before games or before practice but it'd be 2 or 3 beers, the night before a practice, which as a high level athlete, you can't do that. But
Mhm.
ultimately, what I recognized in myself is that I was suppressing my emotions, my feelings, my the knowing that it was an uneasy environment, and I didn't have the proper. And that's really where I'm stepping into with my coaching is I don't want a player to feel like that they're not in a safe enough environment, that they don't have a place to turn to sort of work through what they're going through and understand where they are at in the landscape and understand how they can maximize things, even if for me it was not getting called into the 18-man roster week in and week out. But what are the things that I can be doing to be setting myself up so that the next opportunity will come, even if that opportunity would still be a part of San Jose the following year or going to another club? What are the habits and the things that I can be doing and the ways in which I can understand myself and the situation to then set myself up for better things down the road, knowing that that environment wasn't going to last forever. But if I really focused on myself and really treated myself with love and respect and grace and understand that it was a difficult situation, that I could have propelled myself to a different, better situation for myself. But ultimately, I was not one of the things I recognized in myself as an athlete in so many different experiences that I often looked outward. It was thinking that if the coach played me, then I felt valued, or if they gave me the contract, then I felt valued, rather than looking in at myself first and foremost and knowing my value, knowing my worth, and staying true in that, and knowing that I'm in control of my feelings. My feelings aren't dictated by what happens around me.
Mhm. So, one question that popped in my head was when you're not playing, how do you maintain that? And think back to, there's youth players that don't get much playing time, or, that they're fighting. They just have somebody better ahead of them, or whatever the reason may be. And then when you get up higher, it can be more difficult, more difficult in the college game and definitely in the professional game. So, what did you do to keep your mentality to kind of change it around and have that internal drive?
There was a couple crucial moments that I remember in my career. One of them, when I was a youth player, I remember I was a consistent starter. I played a lot of minutes, and my performance was starting to decline. And my coach essentially benched me on one game. I didn't start a game, and I remember that feeling of being taken out and being sort of, disciplined for my lack of performance. But what I was able to recognize in that moment is it wasn't a lack of my ability, it was a lack of my effort.
Mhm.
And I had made the decision, I consciously made the decision in that moment that I knew I was going to go on, get an opportunity to play on the field again at some point. And I think for most youth players, I think you will get an opportunity to play again at some point. What I did in that moment was said, I will not give my coach an opportunity to make that decision again. I won't let my work rate allow him to say, you're not working hard enough, you're not trying hard enough, I'm going to take you off. Now, when I got to college, I had to redshirt because I wasn't quite at the level yet. But
Mhm.
I still carried that sense of, well, I'm going to work as hard as I possibly can so that when I am ready to play the next year or in the spring for that instance, that I am going to make it extremely difficult for them to take me off the field.
Mhm.
And that was the conscious decision. I think oftentimes what youth players struggle with, and collegiate players and professional players, is they aren't willing to address themselves in the situation. If you're not playing, there's a reason that you're not playing. For me, it was my work rate. I got complacent with how I was playing, and my coach decided to take me out and to bench me because of that. I think oftentimes players will get redshirted or won't play, and they blame the coach. They're not able to really look at themselves and evaluate, okay, what is it that even before you have a conversation with the coach, you really have to ask yourself, what is it that I'm doing and that may be keeping me off the field? Is it my ability, okay, well then I need to get more technical or be able to pass better. Is it my work rate? Am I not working as hard as the other players? Okay, well, I need to improve how hard I'm working. Am I not fit enough? Am I not able to play? Can the coach not trust me because I can't run for 60, 70 minutes? What is
Mm.
it? Because there is a reason. Would you agree with that as a coach? There's a reason if someone's not playing.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely right. Like it's all those things, and every player is different, but yeah, sometimes your technical ability is not good enough, and you just need to work harder. Sometimes physically not. Sometimes it depends on the actual game that you're playing. But I think you nailed it right there. Is number one, you have to take personal responsibility, and to understand you can control some things. You can't the only way you can convince a coach to get you on the field is for you to do the work and improve either, your technical ability, tactical understanding, your level of fitness, your work rate, and your attitude, right? It's hard to change how tall you are. You can't do that, right? But all those things are in your control. And that's also never a guarantee that, hey, okay, now you're going to play, just because of that. Sometimes you still don't play, and that's just kind of the way life is. But more often than not, the coach will notice those kind of things. But so if, let's say, a player's not playing, talks to their parents, and their parents starts complaining about the coach and blaming the coach. And I've heard that from so many different parents who have talked to me, and especially if it's something like an ODP team, even though ODP is not quite what it was when I was coaching. But let's just use that for reference. That I often hear like, oh, it's political, right? That these players got chosen for the ODP team or that they're on the starting field, right? So right then that a parent is trying, right, going through their own ego, right, operating from their own false self and saying basically, this is the coach's fault. It has nothing to do with you, you know? So then the player is in some sort of conflict because the player, I think, automatically is going to say, like, I'm not good enough or I'm not doing something, right? But then as soon as the parent chimes in with something like that, then all of a sudden the player can start believing it, like, oh yeah, this is because the coach is friends with that player's parents or whatever the story that they're creating it, and so then they don't change, right? But if parents can say, like, hey, if they can go in and validate, said, and I know it's really tough to all of a sudden not be starting. But let me ask you something. What can you do in this situation? And sometimes players don't want to hear that from their parents. That's why it helps to have, people like us working with kids, and parents as well, so that they can shift, right? But as soon as the player says, okay, what can I control? And we name those things that they can, then all of a sudden, they're taking that full responsibility. And I just wanted to touch something on what you said about alcohol use. I think that's very, very common, especially with older teens, who are maybe seniors in high school and then college, right? It's kind of part of the college team culture is to have parties, right? And have the typical college social life and even professionals as well, that it becomes this, first of all, cultural thing, but then I think in your situation, it was a way to kind of escape a little bit. Am I hitting on something there?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think when you were talking, one thing that came to me was that sometimes we can get caught up in comparing ourselves to our teammates. I had teammates in my career in college and in the professional ranks that could do things to their body and bounce back very quickly and still perform at a high level. Now, could they have performed at a higher level? Sure. I'm pretty positive that they could have, but they were able to, let's say, drink alcohol the night before a game and still go out and perform well the next day. And I oftentimes would get caught up in that and say, well, if they can do it, maybe I can do it, or But that's also where recognizing yourself is so crucial. That what are the behaviors that are going to help you and hinder you? You know, maybe I could train my body to a point where you could do that, because that's probably what that player did. But what I started recognizing myself is that's not helping me at all. And
Mhm.
that's also, I'm escaping myself. I'm sort of, you know, not allowing myself to feel what I'm feeling and really face it on and really allow it. One thing that I've discovered in myself that I wish I knew when I was playing is that I don't have to sort of suppress the feelings, that I can actually let them come, address them, you know, speak to them, give them space, and then allow them to move on. Whereas I would get, you know, emotional about coaches or the way we're playing or the way the club's doing things, and I would just get angry at that or get frustrated, and it would just sort of be an onward spiral. And then I would search for ways to escape that were unhealthy, that weren't helping me, rather than really allowing myself to feel it, address it, and then be able to let it go.
Mhm. Yeah, it's amazing. I think a lot of society, they, all this is kind of related to burnout, right? We feel burnout when things aren't going our way, right? And that what they do to try and counter the feeling of burnout actually burns them out even more. Because alcohol, like, it's a poison, you know? Um, a little bit in moderation is not so bad, but like you said, when you're trying to be a high level athlete or you are a high level athlete, you're not going to perform at a high level if you're poisoning yourself, you know? Now, I will say that there are freaks of nature like Dennis Rodman, it's well documented, even Michael Jordan, who could drink alcohol, who could even play drunk, and still perform at a high level. But that's an anomaly. That's like the 0.01% of the 1% of high level athletes who can do that kind of stuff. But even then, it affects them energetically, spiritually, like in order to be at a high level, you have to have some sort of imbalance and some sort of like major drive within yourself, right? And that imbalance, it's very like it's a very masculine energy, and you're like pushing yourself. And sometimes people just want to take the edge off, right, with those kind of things so that they're not so driven. But there are healthier ways to do that. You don't have to get into that. And I think that's what you and I are teaching. Part of it is like a healthy mentality, and also like preparation, and to understand like we're made up of energy. So it's like how to keep our energy high. And alcohol is one of those things that really lowers your energy, right? And it's the same thing that goes with nutrition. Like I've seen so many players eating like fast food, processed food, and I'm just like, whoa. And sure, they can have some success, but they can also burn their bodies out and they can have injuries, sicknesses, like the more healthy things you put into your body, you're building resiliency in your immune system in your body, and it's going to prevent inflammation, which is a huge thing for not just the physical body, but the mental body as well, right? How did your nutritional and physical journey shift and change during your career as a youth into college into pros?
Yeah, I think nutrition is one of those things I've always done a pretty good job with. My my parents were pretty healthy. We didn't have too many sodas around the house. We didn't drink too many sugary drinks. We drank a lot of water. Um, and that was something I think I cut soda out of my life when I was in high school. It was one of the things I was able to just say, I don't think that this is good for me, and I was able to cut it out. And I've always been very good with consuming water, and Gatorade, and I drink a lot of electrolytes now too. And that was something that I was drinking a lot of in my professional career, was healthy electrolytes. I would say, the when you're talking about nutrition, I felt like I really nailed towards the end of my career the foods that I was eating and figuring out. I remember going my professional career. I remember I would pregame meal. I would eat pasta, chicken, and broccoli,
Mm.
but I would be so like gassy and so like, and I think part of that was nerves, but I remember feeling really tired going into the games, like almost like, ooh, like dragging. Um, and I had started tweaking and playing around with my nutrition, and I started figuring out that removing broccoli and adding brown rice instead of pasta and
Mm.
having like avocado instead of broccoli, like those were just subtle things that like I didn't feel like I had that like sort of that like kind of that crash like right before a game.
Mm.
And the other thing that I also felt like helped with gut and energy was the way in which I approached uh, a pregame day, sort of say, and dedicating a moment of rest and meditation and
Mm.
minimizing screen time as much as possible helped tremendously with the like the pregame like crash that I think a lot of players feel because it's a awkward thing to train in the mornings and then play a game every day Monday through Friday, train 9 to 11, and then all of a sudden on Saturday you're playing a game on at 7 p.m.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a total adjustment, and so that day you can almost like get tired. By the time you're going into a game, you can almost feel this like lull. But
Mm.
I've and that's another thing that I started to do a good job of understanding where the energy kind of peaked and dipped, but also
Mm.
now in my life too, understanding, where is my energy peaking and dipping, and when is it time to put things away and rest and recover and help the energy regenerate.
Mm. Yeah, that sleep and recovery is so crucial, and a lot of people have terrible sleep hygiene, right? Because so many people, and I used to be one of these until I read this book called Why We Sleep, and it really, you know, shifted things for me to make sure I had like a screen-free room and that I wasn't in front of a screen at least an hour before bedtime, taking a shower right before bed because it raises the body temperature, which then lowers it because you sleep better when your body is cooler. Dr. Matthew Walker was the name of the author of that. And it's a really, really amazing book. It gets to thinking of like, oh man, how important this actually is and how it not just affects the body, but the mind as well, because as you know, and you've tuned into with meditation, like getting yourself mentally and energetically set before a game gives you energy. And there's studies showing about how it helps with gray matter in your brain, helps you be able to process information quicker. And athletes, especially when you're at a high level, there's such a small difference in what can score a goal, you can get scored on, and it's based on those little split seconds decisions right under pressure. And that's where meditation and getting yourself mentally focused and to do it consistently is really helpful. And that's something that I push everybody I work with, whether they're a coach, player, or parent, because there's so many benefits. And yeah, when did you start your meditation process and how did that really shift things for you?
I started I started my meditation process probably the last 3 or 4 years of my career, but I would say I started my visualization process at the first year of my career. And that visualization process for me was, I remember I was playing in Reno, we had a hot tub. And I would always hop in the hot tub right when I got to the locker room just to warm my legs up to then allow me to roll out and stretch. But when I was in the hot tub, I wouldn't close my eyes, but I would start to say to myself, and I would start to think and really like kind of played out in my head how I would say I'm going to score and get an assist today. And I
Mm.
would sort of visualize that happening for me. I would see myself scoring, taking shots, seeing the ball hit the back of the net. I really started to, sort of believe that every game I was going to score and get an assist. And so
Mhm.
that's where my visualization process started. I held that with me throughout my whole career, that sort of playing that out in my head. I'm going to score and get an assist today. And then my meditation process really started, like I said, 3 or 4 years towards the end of my career, where, when we had a lull time between breakfast and our pregame meal, which is really where we had the biggest stretch of time, I would always set 20 minutes aside to meditate in that moment and to, lay down more often than not in my bed or on the road in the hotel bed, and would lay there and meditate. And if I could try and take a nap, that was hard for me. I know that could have been beneficial, but meditation really started then. I'm curious to know what the benefits that you found in your life with meditation are, and sort of how you practice your meditation.
Hmm. That's also evolved over the years. And at first it's like, oh my God, I can't meditate. I'm just like thinking about all these things. And then I grew to realize that like, it's not all about just emptying your head. It's more just like observing the thoughts, letting them come in. And sometimes you can get lost in the thoughts, but my main focus now is when I do get lost in the thoughts, I come back to observing them and I'm like, whoa, I really was just lost in those. And now let me just observe what's going on, because we can both be the person who's creating the thoughts and also over here, the person who is observing those thoughts. Um, so for me now, what I do in my process is actually focus on moving energy. And I have some stuff on my website, on my resources page, free stuff that does these kind of activities. But basically, I really focus because I'm intellectually centered. So I'm very like active up here and I don't feel as much. And the feeling comes in the first three chakras. So in your root chakra, kind of down below your groin, in your sacral chakra, just below the belly button, and in your solar plexus, just above your belly button. So I really focus on like kind of pushing my energy down from my head down there because that gets me centered. And once I start to kind of feel like a little bit of buzz there, then I'm like, okay, I know I'm grounded in, right? I'm starting to feel, and now I can go up into my intellect and I have that balance. So when I feel like I have that balance, I do some other exercises. But then what I like to do from there when I'm like centered is to step into gratitude, and I start to feel it because gratitude and appreciation, it's stored here in the prefrontal cortex. And, for kids, they're still developing their prefrontal cortex. It starts in very young childhood, kind of peaks between 8 and 14. And then when they're adolescents, it starts to prune, starts to kind of like cut away at the stuff they don't use as much and starts to sharpen the things that they are using. That's where kind of they start to develop mastery is around that age. And then it fully develops or like clicks on when they're in their mid 20s, sometimes late 20s. So what I've learned is that you can activate gratitude. You start to feel appreciation for whatever it is, for your sport, for your teammates, your coach, your parents, what they do, whatever it is in life. And that activates both the heart and the third eye. And then from there, that's when the visualization can start to come out and it can start to be really, really powerful. What I learned to do as a player, as an amateur indoor soccer player for many years in my life, because I owned an indoor soccer arena, so I played quite a bit, was I like to focus on the energy that I wanted to set. And for me, that was playing with a high level of focus and a high level of discipline. And both of those things, it's important to have both kind of going at an upward trajectory. If you have a high level of focus, or I'm sorry, I shouldn't say discipline, of intensity. High level of discipline, focus is kind of the same thing, and then a high level of intensity. If you have a high level of intensity with no focus and discipline, it's going to be bad news, right? You could be playing hard and making tackles, but you've lost yourself. And if you have a high level of focus and discipline with no intensity, then sure, yeah, you're focused, but you're not able to like increase. You need to have both. So that's what did is like, okay, not just that's what I want mentally, but what does that feel like in my body? So I would put that in. And then for like the technical stuff, I always focused on I'm going to have a good first touch every single time. And when I could imagine that, what that feels like, that sweet feeling on the ball, when you get a great pass and then you just take a sweet first touch, it was always feeling what that was like. And more often than not, it helped in games. So that's where I went with it, was to get that specific. And then when you activate the third eye, it kind of sends out that message into the universe. It like, you have it within yourself, but then you send it forward, and you can send it forward to other people too. It's pretty amazing work.
Yeah, that is something I completely agree in as well. I think in the ability to send things out into the universe and then you receive that back. I'm really interested and also very much believe in the feeling of it, right? And I think at moments I did it almost subconsciously in my career before I really understood it and really like tried to practice it. I was practicing things, and they were bringing me great benefit. And one of them was doing almost that same process like you talked about, where I started to believe that if I could just connect my first pass in a game, then the rest of the game I trusted would sort of work itself out. So I would, and when I would go into games and I would be really aware of that, like I'm just going to focus on connecting my first pass, and then almost when any game gets started, it feels like it's happening really fast. And so if I could connect that first pass, then everything would slow down and I would be able to get into the rhythm of it. But
Hmm.
when I focused on that, I think I would also take on the feeling. What does it feel like to actually connect that first pass? And it would be a really calming, peaceful, confident feeling in myself. And then the rest of the game would take care of itself. That was the only thing that I would focus on as well, is sort of, and I think a lot of meditation and manifestation is also that, and visualization. I've talked about that as well in terms of scoring goals. Like what does that feel like in your body to imagine yourself scoring a goal and feeling that rush, that excitement, and the fans, and seeing the fans jump up, and the rush that you get from that feeling when you can sort of create that before yourself. Then when you're in that moment, that split second moment, you're trusting that your body has sort of already created that for yourself. Can you kind of touch upon the science and like the idea behind all that?
Yeah, it's a frequency, right? We're made up of energy, as I said. So when you kind of become that frequency, and that's where the feeling comes in, it's like you've already created it as if you happen, and it's already happened. And that's the whole point, and the power behind manifestation is to feel it as if it already happened. And so it's kind of hard to describe scientifically, but that's essentially what it is like you tapping into that frequency, and then it's like you're becoming that. And you can do this with anything. And I learned to do that as a coach as well, of like, all right, I'm going to set a super focused and super intense energy ahead of time to my players, right? And they could feel it. And we touched on this in the last time of, like I went in a few times in training sessions, just kind of low energy, and then they would feel that. So I was unintentionally sending that energy forward. And then I learned like, no, I need to set it forward. I need to become intensity. I need to become discipline. And then you put in that frequency, and we're all powerful people. Like we can start to put it out there for us, but you're just absolutely right. It's like that feeling is all about everything, because you can do it mentally and it's like, okay, yeah, but you know, if you can become that feeling, then it's so much more powerful, and that's why, athletes, coaches, parents, Like in order to be successful, like you have to prepare yourself physically, as we talked about, mentally and energetically as well. And that's when you can really like become more successful. And even it happened with Michael Jordan. Once Phil Jackson became his coach, he started introducing meditation and visualization. His game went to a different level. Like sure, he had Scottie Pippen all of a sudden too on the Bulls, which helped, and he had a great coach, which helped. But still, like he really propelled himself to a higher level. And he's written about it. Phil Jackson has written about it. Like it's really, really powerful.
Yeah, Phil was one of those coaches that kind of was introducing his players to all these things that we're talking about, and I know he was really ingrained in sort of the Native American culture and the way
Mhm.
that they saw the world, and I think he did one thing that I envision is sort of bridging the same things that I think he was bridging from a very early standpoint in this, which is all these things, everything is energy, your energy, being in line with your highest self, understanding yourself, aligning, getting realigned with things that are you, that help you, that benefit you, figuring those out, and then bridging that to sport and how that comes together with being an athlete and being a sport. And that's one thing I'm trying to talk about in my, and I there's a part of me that wishes that had a deeper understanding and a practice of all this energy work and visualization and meditation when I was an athlete. But it is my mission to bring that to the next generation, to help those, to sort of help them see it so that they can, I also believe that, I one thing that I'm passionate about is US soccer, US men's national team. And I believe that all this work is going to be crucial in the US winning a World Cup one day. The energy,
Yep.
collective energy around the country, around the team, around each individual players and their belief in the way that they approach things, the way that they believe. Like you have to believe and you have to feel that feeling before you can go and do it. And I still think
Yeah.
there's a collective sense that people as a whole, and even probably the players to some point, don't believe that they can accomplish that. And so
Mhm.
we'll never be able to accomplish it if we don't believe.
Yep. No, I absolutely agree with you 100%. What really struck me was reminded me that my whole purpose of my work really is to play with your heart and play with love.
Mm.
And, that's part of belief, right? Is having that positive energy behind it. And when you are in a team situation where you're playing for each other, you're not just playing for yourself because you can get caught up, right? A lot of times, especially when there's money involved and fame and notoriety involved, you can get wrapped up a lot in yourself and your own ego. And what are you going to do to improve yourself? But when you can put all that to the side because you want success personally, and that's fine. But when you can shift and really focus in on the collective and loving all of your teammates, your coaches on a deep level, then you're so much more powerful. And I have my personal experience is I played my best games against people that I loved. Against some of my best friends when we were, on a different club team or different high school team. It all came from me being like, I love this person and I'm going to play my best against them. So that helped me raise that level of intensity and that level of focus and discipline. And it's all about love. So when we can always focus in on that aspect, loving ourselves, loving our teammates, loving even our opponents, even if we don't know them, right? You're operating from a higher frequency, and there's no greater frequency than love. Such a powerful vibration.
Yeah, that I completely agree with that. Another thing that came to me when you're speaking that is I I would often I would pray before a game, especially like if during the national anthem was kind of my moment to like, sort of a meditation, bring myself to the present moment of being kind of like, wow, I'm here. Maybe I should have been more present with the national anthem itself, but I kind of centered and I prayed, and I would often pray too for the other team. One of the
Mm.
things I would pray is that I want their safety and no injuries. And I would pray for the other team as well. I think that was me coming from a place of love and being like, hey, like this is, a beautiful thing that we get to come in and compete against each other. But, I pray that I'm safe, that my teammates are safe, that there's no injuries. And I pray that the other team also has, safety. And I think that was me kind of expressing that love and putting that love out there.
Yeah, beautiful, man. Yeah, you were bringing yourself into that present moment, even though the national anthem was running on there. It's a great time. You see pros like LeBron James and Michael Jordan. I remember they would close their eyes, and during that national anthem, they were in there focused and visualizing. But like I said, it's like love is such a powerful, powerful tool. And that's one thing that I encourage all players to focus on. And, it's good to have these long-term goals of what we want, but essentially the long-term goals aren't the most important thing. It's the goals that are right in front of us. Like, what are we doing? And you can always like check yourself of like, hey, I have this goal. Is what I'm doing right now in this moment helping me to achieve this goal? Am I focused and am I playing my hardest in training right now? Am I resting well enough? Am I recovering well enough? Am I eating the right things? With always with that goal in mind, but kind of putting it in like I have on one of these shelves back here, right? Of like knowing that's what I want, but the more important thing is to be in the present moment. And when you are operating from love, you're more often than not in the present moment and in the purest of intentions.
Yeah, that's sort of trusting the process. And I just saw something before we got on here about an athlete kind of talking, just like you're saying, of it's very process oriented. Like it's not, there's no emotional, this football player was talking about how he doesn't have emotional ties to the outcome. He focuses wholeheartedly on his process. And I think that's kind of what you're touching on, that everything he does is about the process, about being present, about putting love and intention and doing everything how he believes is best serving himself and going to serve the collective. And a lot of the outcomes are out of his control. And so he doesn't get emotionally tied to that. Like you're saying, I would love to play professional soccer. I love to play college soccer, and I'm going to put that on the shelf, but it's more so about I'm not going to get emotional about that. I'm just going to focus. Everything I can do is going to be about getting there, and I'm going to do that in a loving and positive way. And I think
Mhm.
that's exactly what you're saying. We could talk about this forever, but I know next week we will be discussing burnout and
Mhm.
different ways that burnout has affected both of us in our own lives, but more importantly in athletes and things that we've seen. Gabe, do you want to just fill people in on how they can get a hold of you and how they can follow you?
Yeah, best way is to go to my website, aclearmind.com. I have a lot of different programs for players, for parents, and for coaches as well. And one that I'm really pushing right now, it's called Raising Resilient Athletes. Great program for parents on how to support their athlete, how to prevent burnout, how to continue to have a positive relationship with your athlete as they're going through all the struggles and the stresses that life brings. And if you go to my resources page, I have a lot of free resources available, some of that we talked about here on this episode. So I'm looking forward to the next one. Chris, how can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, my website is co-createsc.com, but more importantly, I'm on Instagram and YouTube, and that's where you can follow me. I offer more one-on-one mentorship for athletes specifically, and I offer a free 30-minute call for athletes that are really just looking to reach their highest potential and play collegiately, professionally, or that are in college and professionals and seeking coaching and guidance and help So that's how you can get a hold of me. But it was a pleasure today, Gabe. Thanks for doing these calls with me, and I'm looking forward to next week.
Yeah, Chris, it's always fun. Love geeking out on soccer and consciousness and awareness and helping people grow. So appreciate you and all that you do and looking forward to next week as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Gabe.